For thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, humans have used the ocean.
Tim Shank is an oceanographer.
Every deep sea biology meeting we have is discussing deep sea mining.
The reason deep sea mining has become such a hot topic is because of what's down there. Billions, potentially trillions of dollars worth of so-called rare earth minerals.
The United States imports over 80% of its rare earth elements from China.
This week, an emergency declaration you may not have heard about, and a Cold War-type race to the bottom of the earth.
There's more tax money going toward coronavirus relief than anything to compare it to.
That amount of money is typically going to have some amount of fraud.
The CARES Act gives $2.6 trillion tax dollars in emergency assistance, and there's more just waiting for Congress to pull the trigger.
If you can't look at every penny, how do you decide what to track?
That is the core issue.
Today, who's following the money and what they're finding? And the devolution of the news as we once knew it.
That report by the New York Times was not true.
Yeah, in the main, it was not true.
We take a moment for a preview of my new book, Slanted.
Welcome to Full Measure. I'm Sharyl Attkisson. During the frenzy leading into the election, there was a national emergency declaration you may not have heard about. In late September, President Trump declared the U.S. dependence on China for so-called rare earth minerals a national emergency. Those minerals are essential to technology, from our phones to our top-level defense weapons. In today's cover story, Lisa Fletcher takes us on a deep dive, literally, beneath the Earth's surface into the ocean for the battle below.
For thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, humans have used the ocean. They've relied on the ocean for sources of food, for transportation, and now we're looking more and more for industry, for oils and whatnot, and for resources.
Tim Shank is an oceanographer and a biologist. When he's on dry ground, he works at Woods Hole, the Massachusetts coast town that's given its name to one of the world's leading marine research organizations, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. But his research goes deep to the furthest reaches of the ocean, as far as 35,000 feet beneath the surface.
When I started 20 years ago, the conversation of mineral resources and mining and harvesting from the deep sea wasn't even a topic. And now it's the topic of almost every conversation. Every deep sea biology meeting we have is discussing deep sea mining at the forefront.
The reason deep sea mining has become such a hot topic is because of what's down there. Billions, potentially trillions of dollars worth of valuable minerals, including so-called rare earths, with names you never learned in college chemistry, like gallium, critical for semiconductors in cell phones and 5G communications. Neodymium, creating super strong magnets for electric vehicles and wind turbines. And yttrium and terbium, used for laser targeting and weapons in combat vehicles. In all, 17 metal elements found together at the bottom of the periodic table and at the bottom of the ocean.
In the deep ocean, there's a literal race, like we had to the moon. There's a race to the deep ocean for resources that we don't even know are there yet.
The same elements are found on land. They've been mined for years. But through strategic planning and totalitarian support over 3 decades, one nation has cornered the market: China. While the race to the moon during the Cold War pitted the U.S. against the Soviet Union, there is a new race to control the commodities that control most every facet of modern life, both commercial and military.
The Chinese Communist Party develops and deploys a consolidated industrial plan to capture key sectors of the future economy.
Nate Pekarsik is an expert on China who has advised the Pentagon and intelligence agencies. He sees a critical national security vulnerability.
The United States imports over 80% of its rare earth elements from China. Many aircraft engines require rare earth elements. Many aircraft parts and panels depend upon specific alloys that benefit from rare earth elements, and then everything from missile guidance and radars also include rare earth elements. The Chinese industrial policy has delivered the Chinese Communist Party absolute comparative advantage in the rare earth field.
It's not a new problem, but for the U.S., it became more pressing this year. In July, the Chinese announced sanctions against U.S. defense contractor Lockheed Martin to limit exports of key rare earth minerals the company uses in weapons systems.
They're sending a signal that they're willing to restrict the export from China of these goods that are critical for U.S. aerospace and defense industry.
The Pentagon has been pushing for more production for several years, encouraging new domestic sources of the rare earths and providing financial backing to help start new mines or reopen old ones. One of those is Mountain Pass in California's Mojave Desert. The military dollars helped a new company get the mine started again after the previous owner went bankrupt, partly because of China's control of the rare earth market.
We look at this as surety of supply. We look at this as a patriotic act.
Anthony Marchese is a veteran of both the U.S. Army and Wall Street. He's also getting into the race, leading a Texas-based company that plans to start mining near El Paso.
It's unrealistic to assume that American industry will catch up to the Chinese in 10 or 15 years' time. Our number one concern is, will we be able to supply what the United States needs? Number one, we believe we'll be able to do that.
Demand for rare earth minerals is growing faster as technologies evolve at an almost exponential rate. The land-based mines can't keep up. That has made deep-sea mining a Hail Mary for materials. And one of the biggest sources of metal-rich minerals could lie on the seafloor between Hawaii and Mexico, a vast plain as wide as the United States, thought to be covered with mineral-rich nodules.
The layers grow over time and expand outwards.
Woods Hole scientist Ann Dunley has spent a decade studying the biology, geology, and chemistry of the seafloor.
Polymetallic nodules are metal rocks that grow on the seafloor. So they're composed almost entirely of manganese and iron, and also have really high concentrations of copper, zinc, nickel, and cobalt.
How long do they take to grow?
To grow the width of a piece of paper or the width of a human hair requires 10,000 to 100,000 years.
Mining the seafloor involves scooping up vast quantities of sediment and nodules, effectively scraping away an environment formed over thousands or millions of years. Which means for scientists like Tim Shank, there's another race now underway.
The race is for us to gather information to find out what's there before the mining will start, right? To at least inform the mining of what the impacts are going to be. You know, the race is really difficult because the rate at which we discover new things and can not just discover, but can assess a place, right, over a given period of time. What's there? What are the habitats? What's the ecology of all the animals that are living there? Is too long, frankly. You know, mining can be there faster than we can figure all that out.
In the near future, more than a dozen companies will begin mining in the deep waters of the Pacific at an industrial level, none of them American.
The real issue comes when you go into international waters. That it's like the Wild Wild West. When I think about the work that I'm doing in the Hale environment, that is 4 or 5 miles and deeper in our ocean, down to 7 miles, we're discovering novel proteins, novel enzymes, novel adaptations. We've just started this work. These adaptations may lead to unbelievable medical breakthroughs. The rate of discovery of new life forms in our deep ocean is ever increasing. It's astounding. We've discovered, on average, a new species every 10 days for 35 years. It's remarkable.
I feel your sense of anxiety just sitting here.
Manganese nodules take millions of years to form, and yet, what do? Let's go get them. It's not sustainable.
Sustainable or not, the race is on, and right now, the U.S. is playing catch-up. For Full Measure, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
Tim Shank says commercial mining isn't sustainable because it destroys an environment that's taken millions of years to form and may destroy important discoveries yet to be made in the deep sea. Ahead on Full Measure, we investigate the billions of tax dollars spent on coronavirus relief and find some remarkable cases of alleged abuse. There's more tax money going toward coronavirus relief than anything comparable. The amount is more than double the so-called stimulus planned in 2009. Today, who's following the money and what they're finding?
That amount of money is typically going to have some amount of fraud.
Timothy Persons is a top analyst at the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, one of the main agencies overseeing all the coronavirus spending. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, gives $2.6 trillion tax dollars in emergency assistance. Part of that is the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP, up to $659 billion for payroll and expenses to keep small businesses going.
If you can't look at every penny, how do you decide what to track?
Well, our biggest task is we are under the CARES Act. GAO has a mandate to do ongoing oversight wherever it is necessary. Again, not just the size of the spend, but how it's being spent. Is it being spent in a way that is accountable, that you can do proper financial accounting on it? Are we getting return on investment for it?
A big part of that job is watching for waste, fraud, and abuse, and there's already been plenty of that.
The Comptroller General recently testified, and this was a top-level finding that he had reported, is that there were still payments going to, for example, people who are deceased.
The head of the GAO, Jean Dodaro, told Congress the IRS knowingly sent out $1.4 billion in coronavirus relief payments to 1.1 million dead people, including his own mother, who died more than 2 years before. Believe it or not, GAO says the IRS determined it did not have the legal authority to deny payments to those who filed a return for 2019, even if they were deceased.
The IRS initially determined that the deceased people or anybody who filed a return in 2018 or 2019 should be paid. So they knew they were paying people who were deceased. Then it became known publicly. Treasury then reevaluated that position and stopped it.
When we're talking about trillions of dollars, there are two opposing concerns. One, of course, is to get the money out the door as fast as possible to help people. The other is to try to make sure it's not lost to waste, fraud, and abuse.
That's right.
How do you balance that?
Yes, so that is the core issue, and to protect, in our role at GAO, to help Congress look out and to protect the American taxpayer, the investments and things. There's also a specialized unit that has stood up on the pandemic.
Good morning. And
some of the oversight involves crimes.
Unfortunately, almost every crisis brings out not only those who seek to help others, but those who try to exploit the situation for their own unlawful purposes and financial gain.
The Justice Department has charged more than 4 dozen people with trying to steal $175 million through the Paycheck Protection Program. Former NFL player Josh Bellamy is accused of fraud after getting more than $1.2 million in coronavirus relief money. Prosecutors allege he bought $104,000 in luxury items and jewelry at places like Dior and Gucci, spent $62,000 at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino, and applied for coronavirus money for family members and friends. 10 others are charged in the alleged scheme involving 90 fraudulent applications worth more than $24 million. Reality TV star Maurice Mofane of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta got $3.7 million tax dollars for his business, Flame Trucking. Prosecutors say he used $1.5 million of it to buy a Rolls Royce, diamonds, and other jewelry and make $40,000 in child support payments. And David Hines allegedly used $3.9 million in COVID relief funds, in part to buy a $318,000 Lamborghini sports car and $8,500 worth of jewelry and go on a $4,600 shopping spree at Saks Fifth Avenue. Person says one lesson we should have learned after the 2009 stimulus program is that we need a new and better strategic plan when it comes to this sort of spending on such a massive scale.
I think you really do need like a George Marshall kind of person looking across strategically and being able to be both broad and deep on the issues so that that entire system can be built so that we are more responsive in things.
General George Marshall spearheaded the Marshall Plan after World War II to help rebuild Europe and spur a remarkable economic recovery.
We haven't been as prepared as we could have been for this disease or for prior pandemics or other outbreaks of things. And so I really do think the ounce of prevention's worth a pound of cure.
All of those we mentioned who are charged have either said they aren't guilty or they're awaiting a date to enter a plea. Next, to look at the devolution of the news as we once knew it, an early preview of my new book, Slanted. Taking a moment out now for a page from my new book, Slanted, How the News Media Taught Us to Love Censorship and Hate Journalism. It traces the devolution of the news as we once knew it. Exhibit 1 is the historic trend of major media mistakes in the era of Trump, forming a disturbing pattern.
And now, the President and First Lady of the United States will take their first dance.
The tone was set on President Trump's first official day in office. CNN claimed Nancy Sinatra was not happy about her father Frank Sinatra's song My Way being used at Trump's inauguration. I did it my way. Nancy Sinatra responded on Twitter, "That's not true. I never said that. Why do you lie, CNN? Actually, I'm wishing him the best." Meantime, Time incorrectly reported that President Trump had removed the bust statue of Martin Luther King Jr. from the Oval Office. That false news went viral. In February 2017, TMZ reported Trump had changed the name Black History Month to African American History Month, implying the change was racist. In fact, it turns out Presidents Obama, George W. Bush, and Clinton all called Black History Month African American History Month. Also, the Washington Post reported on the cabinet battle over Trump's immigration order. The article was repeatedly updated to note that one of the reported meetings did not actually occur, a conference call did not happen as described in the article, and actions attributed to Trump were actually carried out by his chief of staff. And the New York Times reported on supposed contacts between Trump campaign staff and senior Russian intelligence officials. FBI Director James Comey later testified it was not true.
That report by the New York Times was not true. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, in the main, it was not true.
In May, the BBC and The Guardian reported because Trump wasn't wearing headsets, he didn't bother to listen to the translation of a speech by Italy's prime minister. But Trump was wearing his earpiece in his right ear, as always, said the White House. In June 2017, NBC News reported that Russian President Putin said he had compromising information about Trump. Actually, Putin said the opposite.
Do you have something damaging on our president?
Well, this is just another load of nonsense. Where would we get this information from?
CNN and ABC falsely reported that FBI Director Comey was going to refute Donald Trump's claim that Comey told Trump 3 times he wasn't under investigation. Instead, Comey confirmed Trump's claim under oath.
It appears that you actually volunteered that assurance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
CNN retracted a report claiming Congress was investigating a Russian investment fund with ties to Trump officials. Newsweek reported Poland's First Lady refused to shake Trump's hand, but later acknowledged she did. CNN edited a video to make it appear as though Trump impatiently dumped a box of fish food into the water in Japan. The full video showed Trump had simply followed the lead of Japan's prime minister. Bloomberg and the Wall Street Journal falsely reported special counsel Robert Mueller had subpoenaed Trump's bank records. AP reported a new survey showed trust in the media had fallen during the Trump presidency, but the survey was actually conducted under President Obama. The New York Times said a hypothetical family's tax bill would rise nearly $4,000 under Trump's tax plan. It turns out their taxes would actually go down $43. The New York Times and CNN shared a story with photos of immigrant children in cages. It turns out the photos were from 2014, during the Obama administration. In December 2018, NBC reported Trump was the first president since 2002 not to visit the troops at Christmas time, but Trump actually left the White House on Christmas to visit troops in Iraq. ABC aired video purportedly showing a slaughter and horrific report of atrocities against Kurds by Turkey after President Trump withdrew U.S. troops.
This video right here appearing to show Turkey's military bombing Kurd civilians in a Syrian border town.
But the video was file tape of a training video in the U.S. In November 2019, Newsweek falsely reported that President Trump was spending Thanksgiving golfing in Florida. He was actually in Afghanistan serving dinner to U.S. troops.
Good morning.
CBS aired a story in March of 2020 supposedly showing a New York hospital crowded with coronavirus patients.
It's all hands on deck in America's hospitals.
It was actually file tape from Italy. A week later, CBS News mistakenly used the Italy video again.
And those are just a few examples. Slanted examines what's behind this trend and also takes a deep dive into the very public devolution of the New York Times and CNN, where I used to work. In my new book, Slanted, I take on the media's misreporting from coronavirus to Silicon Valley censorship. Slanted is available now. We'll be right back with a look at what's ahead next week on Full Measure. Next week on Full Measure, the controversy over transgender athletes. At some high schools across the country, biological males are switching teams and competing in girls' sports. That's causing conflicts over athletic opportunities and constitutional rights. In Connecticut, a group of athletes has made a federal case of it. Have all of you lost races and competitions to biological males?
Yes, we all have.
Okay. How many races?
Too many to count. I personally lost 4 state championships, 2 All New England Awards, and countless other opportunities because of it.
Next week, we tackle the transgender divide in sports. Now, there are several ways to watch Full Measure from home or on the go. To watch full episodes, just download the Stir app on your phone or on your Roku, Apple TV, and Fire. And if you want to hear more stories, check out our new podcast, Full Measure After Hours, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Until then, we'll be searching for more stories that hold powers accountable. Thanks for watching. I'm Sharyl Attkisson.